Okay, we are live. So, welcome to our first-time visitors here tonight. And we always might have some first-time visitors on YouTube Live, so I just want to briefly explain who we are and what we're doing. So, we video all the Bible studies that we do, and if you are ever sick or just don't feel like coming, you can always stay home and watch what we're doing live on YouTube. And if you ever need instructions on how to do that, let me know. That's why the camera or the phone is right here. It's mostly close to me because of microphone purposes, so it can pick up volume. Louie and I are looking into video cameras that will work better than that. So as soon as I have time to figure out how that's going to work, we'll change that up. Okay, so just as a recap, this is an expository Bible study. So what that means is we go through a book of the Bible or a chapter of the Bible at a time. So instead of talking about a specific topic, we just take a book and we just go through it one chapter at a time, verse by verse. And it's nice because it's a good way to learn the Bible, learn the history about what's going on, learn the characters, learn everything. And also, we try to deal with whatever verses we come to, whether they're difficult or awkward or what have you. You know, we don't really try to dance around any parts of the Bible. We just hit everything head on. So the best thing you can do to prepare for the Bible study here is simply read the Bible ahead of time. We're in the book of Genesis. Currently, we're going over Genesis chapters 33 through 35. That's right. Big, bold claim. We're going to get through 3 chapters this evening. And if you have any questions about the chapters that we're going to go over, please write them down and ask as we go through the study. We will always stop for questions. So anything that I say, if it doesn't make sense or I explained it poorly or you just flat out think I'm wrong and you want to argue, raise your hand. We'll be happy to get into anything. And we'll always be happy to stay late and answer any questions all night long and talk about the Bible whenever we're done. So, I also want to tell everyone kind of why we started this Bible study. So I was thinking about it and I came up with 3 reasons. So number 1, I really felt like God wanted me to get back into teaching the Bible. Joanna and I didn't really have a platform for that. We left the church that we were going to for a long time, and I was a Sunday school teacher there, and we hadn't really found a church home yet, so I felt like God was pushing me to get back into teaching the Bible, so we just started this at our house and said, let's gather some people and we'll get going and see how it goes. Number 2, we had a friend who worked nights and couldn't get to church as often as she wanted, so we started this on a night that she had off, just so she had an opportunity to get together with other believers and go through the Bible. And then number 3, and this one is really close to my heart. I am continually amazed at the number of people who either go to church or who were raised in church who don't know their Bible very well. Lots and lots of people who, like I said, were raised in church or go to church regularly, haven't even read through their Bible, one time to familiarize themselves with it. And I understand that. It's a large book. It can be looked at as a daunting task. But our goal was simply to help people learn their Bible. We just want, Christians and churchgoers to learn their Bible, and I hope people fall in love with the Bible like I have. And we want people reading their Bible. And from there, I figure God will take over from there and guide and direct, and hopefully His will be done in their lives. So the fact that you're here with us tonight to study the Bible means that something is happening in your life and you have a desire to learn about God and the Bible, and that's wonderful that you're here with us studying the Bible tonight. So, I don't know if I said this, but I think just about everyone here knows we meet every other week. So the next time we're getting together will be Tuesday, April 16th. And then, what's the biblically significant day that's coming up right after that? Easter. That's right, Passover. So Passover begins on Erev Shabbat. So that's Friday evening, April 19th. That's this year. It's got a different day each year. It's reconnecting. Okay, it says we're live again.
You're live.
Okay, good. So Passover is not based on our calendar. It is based on the Jewish calendar. We'll go over that. But we will be meeting again on April 30th. And on April 30th, we're going to discuss Passover and Easter and the whole shebang and how it all works. And you do not want to miss that one. I promise I will have something that will offend everybody. So you want to make sure and come back on April 30th for that. Okay, so before we get into chapter 33, that was a joke. I know it was dry and it was quick, but I'd appreciate a courtesy laugh, at least from one of you from time to time. Okay, so before we get into chapter 33, I'm going to give a quick recap as to what's going on in the preceding chapters, and then we'll jump right in with chapter 33 and we'll go from there. So what's happening here is that Jacob is coming home. He's going back to where his father Isaac lives, and he has been away for no less than 20 years. And when Jacob left, at the time that he left, Esau, his brother, not only wanted him dead, he wanted to kill him. He was very mad at what happened between Isaac and Esau and their father, between Jacob and Esau and their father Isaac. So Esau wanted to kill him. Since Jacob's been gone, he has accumulated a fortune. He married Rachel and Leah, and we went over that whole fiasco. He has had 11 children from 4 women who are all currently there with him, and we went over the family tree the last time we got together. And now Jacob is coming back home to see his father and go back to the land where he's supposed to be, where God told him to go. And he is right on the border of entering the land of Edom, which is Esau's territory. And Jacob has just made a covenant with Laban, the guy up north in Haran. And Laban was mad with Jacob, and they worked it out. And Laban said, okay, here's the deal. Here's a line. You don't get on this side, I'm not going on your side. And we're going to separate and stay apart because I don't trust you and you don't trust me. And that's how we're going to work it. So Jacob is currently kind of between a rock and a hard place because Laban, the guy who kind of wanted to kill him from where he just came, is behind him. And Esau, his brother, is in front of him in Washington. Who does Esau have with him? MacArthur?
200 men?
Nope.
400 men?
400 men. What can we call that? A small army. So Jacob is scared. He is concerned about what's in front of him. He's about to run into his brother Esau. And with that, we're going to pick it up in chapter 33. So open with me your Bible to chapter 33, and we'll read verse 1 in just a second. And I am going to bow my head for a word of prayer, and then we'll jump in. So, dear Lord, we just want to ask that you would please have your hand of blessing upon this evening. Like every time we get together, Lord, that's really all I want. I don't feel like my prayers are very original whenever we start praying before this Bible study. I want you to be in charge. I want you to speak through me. I want you to touch the hearts of everyone here and help us to learn the Bible so we can be more like you and less like us. And Lord, we do love you, and we're grateful that we live in America. We have the freedom where we can still get together in public and read the Bible and study it and talk about it. And I'm grateful, Lord, for the folks that are here. And we just pray that this Bible study will be a blessing, and hopefully, Lord, you will change our hearts and our lives and make us more like you in this next week. We love you, and in Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay, so we'll pick it up in chapter 33. I'm going to read the first 4 verses, and then we will jump in and see what it's saying. And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau came, and with him 400 men. And he divided the children unto Leah, and unto Rachel, and unto the 2 handmaids. And he put the handmaids and their children foremost, and Leah and her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindermost. And he passed over before them, and bowed himself to the ground 7 times, until he came near to his brother. And Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Okay, so verse 1, starting out with a question. What does Jacob think his brother Esau is going to do to him? Cause him harm in some way, right?
Smackdown.
Yeah, he is concerned that Esau is still mad about what happened, because the last thing they talked about was how Esau wanted to kill him, and Jacob was scared, and him and his mom made a plan where he was going to run away until Esau calmed down. And that was 20 years ago. So, in Genesis 27, verse 41 is where Esau said he was going to kill him. So if you want to, write that down and look it up later, that's where Esau promises, as soon as my father passes away, I am going to go after this guy and I'm going to kill him. So Jacob, seeing Esau with 400 men, was concerned for his life. So in verses 2 and 3, and we read about this, I want to say 2 chapters ago, Jacob had a plan, and that plan was to break up his family and his substance into various groups. And he sent forth before him a whole bunch of his flocks and his herds, and then one of his wife's handmaids and some of his kids. And then there was a little space, and he sent another group of flocks and herds and another handmaid and some more of his kids. And he kept doing that, and his hope was to please Esau with the gifts and to soften up Esau with all the women and children to calm the anger of Esau. So when Esau finally got to Jacob, he wasn't going to be so, bloodthirsty. He was going to hopefully have calmed down. So then it tells us that Jacob bowed 7 times. And please understand that it doesn't mean that he stood there and he bowed 7 times. It says that he bowed 7 times until he came near to his brother. So he approached and he would bow down to the ground, and he would approach a little further and he would bow down to the ground. He is cautiously approaching Esau and watching what's going on with all the gifts and his family ahead of him to see what is taking place. Okay, so let's see. So notice the word they in verse 4. At the end of verse 4, it says, they wept. So Esau missed his brother. It has been 20 years, and clearly at some point Esau has forgiven Jacob. And Jacob, I'm assuming, at least at first, was weeping with tears of joy because he was thrilled that his brother was not, trying to cut his head off. And they're excited, and they are crying together. So it must have been a relief of Jacob, at least to some degree. Now, picking it up in verse 5, we'll read verses 5 through 9. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the women and the children, this is talking about Esau, and said, who are those with thee? And he said, the children which God hath graciously given thy servant. Then the handmaidens came near, and their children, and they bowed themselves. And Leah also with her children came near and bowed themselves. And after came Joseph near, and Rachel, and they bowed themselves. And he said, what meanest thou by all the drove which I met? And he said, these are to find grace in the sight of my Lord. And Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep that thou hast unto thyself. Okay, so in verse 5, Jacob refers to himself as the servant of Esau. And then again, in verse 8, we see that Jacob calls Esau Lord. Now, remember, Jacob had the birthright of the firstborn. But he is setting that aside. He's not trying to play that card that I technically am supposed to be the one in charge with the inheritance from our father. He's not doing any of that. He has a humble and grateful attitude with Esau. And why that is, I don't know. I'm assuming the 400 people behind Esau in the army might have something to do with that. But also in verse 8, Esau asks about all the gifts that Jacob sent before him. So Jacob tells Esau, they are for you to find grace and favor in thy sight. Now, in verse 9, we see that Esau says he doesn't want the gifts. And you might think of this as he's just being kind and gracious to his brother. But even though he is happy to have his brother back, most of us don't understand the tribal customs associated with that gift. It is imperative that Esau accept the gift of Jacob, because the gift was regarded as a covenant of friendship. By accepting the gift of Jacob, that meant there could be no grudge. He's accepting the gift and things are okay. So, we're going to read in verse 10 and 11. Follow along here with me. So, Esau just said, I have enough, brother, keep that thou hast unto thyself. In verse 10, and Jacob said, Nay, I pray thee, if now I have found grace in thy sight, then receive my present at my hand. For therefore I have seen thy face as though I had seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me. Take, I pray thee, my blessing that is brought to thee, because God hath dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. And he urged him, and he took it. Now, Jacob makes it clear, if I have found grace in thy sight, then receive my gift. That's what he says. So Jacob knows that he is not safe, he's not out of the woods, so to speak, until Esau accepts the gift. Now in verse 11, there are 4 words that are important. What are they?
Take I pray thee?
Nope. Keep going.
Oh, God hath dealt graciously with me.
Nope. Keep going.
I give up.
It's okay. What's that?
And he took it.
And he took it. Okay, Esau took the gift. So Jacob urged him and he took it. Very good. So Esau accepts the gift. Jacob can now officially have a sigh of relief. All right, he took the present. We're okay. And now we can move on. It doesn't really last. So let's read verses 12 through 17. In verse 12, and he said, let us take our journey and let us go, and I will go before thee. This is Esau talking to Jacob, saying, okay, let's keep going. I'll go before you. Me and all my men, we'll make sure the coast is clear and it's safe, and let's continue on with our journey. Verse 13, and he said unto him, my Lord knoweth that the children are tender, and the flocks and herds with young are with me. And if men should overdrive them, one day all the flock will die. Let my Lord, I pray thee, pass over before his servant, and I will lead on softly, according as the cattle that goeth before me, and the children be able to endure, until I come unto my Lord, unto Seir. And Esau said, let me now leave with thee some of the folk that are with me. And he said, what needeth it? Let me find grace in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way unto Seir. And Jacob journeyed to Succoth and built him an house and made booths for his cattle. Therefore the name of the place is called Succoth. Okay, so Esau wants to leave some of his men behind to assist Jacob, because Jacob has a lot of kids and a family, and he has servants, and he has a very large flocks. We talked about that. Jacob went up to Haran with nothing, and he came back with great substance. Okay, the Lord blessed him. He had flocks and herds, and he had lots to take care of. But Jacob refuses this help from Esau, and Esau concedes, and he is on his way to where? Where's Esau going?
He's going to see, yes.
Seir.
Here.
Okay, Esau is going to Seir. Now, Seir is south and east. Where does Jacob say he's going? Read verse 14 there.
He's going to the west.
So he's gonna go there too.
That's right. Jacob says, Esau, go ahead and lead on. We're going to come behind you at a slower pace because we have these little kids and these flocks with these babies. Okay, and we will come onto you in Seir. So Jacob tells him, just go ahead to Seir. We're going to head on a little bit slower, but we'll see you in Seir in a little bit. Where does Jacob go?
West.
Yeah, he goes to Sukkoth.
Canaan.
Okay, because he doesn't trust Esau. He's still concerned that this friendship with his brother might not last, because he knows how he did him wrong, and he does not trust him, as far as he can throw him. So he's not taking any chances. So Jacob goes to Sukkoth. That is west. Okay, so I don't remember how long it is, and don't trust my math, but I believe Jacob lives in Sukkoth for, it could be up to 20 years. I believe it is definitely no less than 10. And if you want, I can go over the math and how we got to that number in a while. There's another problem here that we're going to get to in a little bit. Did God tell him to go to Sukkoth? No. He said, go back home, okay, to your land, to see Isaac, your father. He's not going there. Again, for whatever reason, Jacob is not ready to go back home. So instead, he goes to Sukkoth. And because of this, we have a whole chapter which ends up being a mess, and we're going to see what takes place here in verse 34 here in a minute. Okay, so let's read verses 18 through 20, and then we'll move on to chapter 34. Okay, in verse 18, and Jacob came to Shalem, the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan. When he came from Padanaram, and pitched his tent before the city. And he bought a parcel of field where he had spread his tent at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And he erected there an altar and called it Elohe Israel. Okay, so the altar is called, so the altar is called God, the God of Israel. Okay, so he is set outside of the city of Shechem in Sukkoth, and that's where he ends up. So let's see the folly that takes place in chapter 34, because he did not just continue on to where God told him to go. In chapter 34, starting in we'll read verses 1 through 5. And Dinah. Now, Mom, wasn't it you that was upset that nothing was said about Dinah in the previous chapters? Okay, so here it is. This is her chapter where she, it's a bad chapter. She doesn't have a good chapter in the Bible. But out of the 11 sons that Jacob had with Rachel and Leah and Bilhah and Zilpah, this is the one daughter. Can anyone tell me which lady had Dinah? For one extra gold star. Who can tell me? What's that? Oh, you guys just read it. Okay. That's fine. And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her. And his soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel, and spake kindly unto the damsel. And Shechem spake unto his father Hamor, saying, Get me this damsel to wife. And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah his daughter. Now his sons were with his cattle in the field, and Jacob held his peace until they were come. Okay, so let's see. Starting in verse 1, what's the problem in verse 1? And this is a principle that we need to understand for the rest of the Old Testament. This is one of the most foundational principles of God's chosen people, the Israelites, that we need to understand. What's the issue in verse number 1 here? She went to hang out with the people in the land of Canaan. Okay? The children of Israel are to remain separate from the children of Canaan. That was the deal with Abraham when he was trying to find a wife for Isaac. He said, I don't want my son marrying, these people. Okay, I want him to marry someone, from our family. And then Isaac, same thing, looking for a wife for Jacob, had to go to a certain place. And it's the same way across the board. God does not want, he wants his chosen people, the nation of Israel, to remain segregated from the rest of the world. Okay, and we're going to get into that more in the rest of this chapter and in the next one. So this is going to come up again and again and again throughout the Bible. Now, the application for us today is the same separation. We are to be separate from the world. There should be some very stark differences between the Christian and the non-saved world. If there's not, that's an issue. Someone should be able to determine that you are different in some way after hanging out with you for a day or two. If you get a new job, hopefully someone gives you that compliment, and you might have someone ask you, do you go to church somewhere? Because they notice something's different about you, the way you talk or the way you don't talk or the things you do or something, but there's supposed to be a difference between God's people and the world. Hopefully that is not too far of a stretch or a shocking comment. So in verse 2, this is talking about rape. The act was not consensual between Shechem and Dinah. Now, this creates a problem beyond what you and I would think. Obviously, the sexual assault is a crime that is punishable. But furthermore, in this culture, when a woman was raped, she was unable to ever have any kind of valid marriage from that point on. So there's more implications than just, the sexual assault and the horrific crime that was committed. So in verse 3, Shechem wanted to marry Dinah and take care of her. And Shechem is also the only man who would want to marry her at this point. In verses 4 and 5, Shechem asked his father to get him Dinah. Now what that means is that Hamor, the father of Shechem, needs to go and talk to Jacob, the father of Dinah, and say, my son wants to marry your daughter, and furthermore, there's an incident. Okay, so Hamor speaking to Jacob is not, an easy conversation. Yeah. Okay, so let's read verses 6 through 12. Then the handmaidens came near. That's chapter 33. How about I get in the right chapter? Chapter 34, verse 6. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out unto Jacob to commune with him. And the sons of Jacob came out of the field when they had heard it, and the men were grieved, and they were very wroth, because he had wrought folly in Israel, in lying with Jacob's daughter, which thing ought not to be done. And Hamor communed with them, saying, the soul of my son Shechem longeth for your daughter. I pray you, give him to wife. And make ye marriages with us, and give your daughters unto us, and take our daughters unto you. And ye shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade ye therein, and get you possessions therein. And Shechem said unto her father and unto her brethren, let me find grace in your eyes, and what ye shall say unto me I will give. Ask me never so much dowry and gift, and I will give according as ye shall say unto me. But give me the damsel to wife. Okay, so now we're getting the details of the communication between Hamor and Jacob. Jacob and his sons were very angry, as was expected. And we see this term, wrought folly in Israel. Now, this term is used many times throughout the Bible. This is the first time it's ever mentioned. And it is used to describe something that happens in Israel as a nation. But technically, they're not a nation yet. They're still a family. So here's my question. When does Israel become a nation? When do they change from family to nation? Who's got a guess? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not a number. It's not a specific number. Okay, but it's an event. What happened in the nation of Israel? Go ahead, Mom. What do you think?
Is it when he brings them to?
Yes, when Moses brings them out of Egypt. And it says that later on, that they went down to Egypt, a family, right? And we're going to get to that in a little bit. They're going to have Joseph is going to go down to Egypt, and then the whole rigmarole and his whole family gets brought down there. So they get brought down to Egypt, a family, and then they leave Egypt, a nation. And there's a 400-year period where they go from family that's in charge and doing well over to slavery, and then Charlton Heston comes in and tells them to let his people go. Okay. Okay, let's see, where are we? Okay, so it's in the book of Exodus when they come out of Egypt. They're a family. All right, verses 8 through 10. Hamor wants Jacob's family to marry into their people. Again, what is the problem here? Yeah, Israel's mixing with the nations. They're not allowed to do it. The Jews are not allowed to marry the Goyim. And this is a good word for us. Okay, what does Goyim mean?
A non-Jewish person.
Okay, although that's correct. Goy, G-O-Y, is nation. Goyim is the nations, or nations plural. So, who does that consist of? Who are the Goyim?
Canaanites.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Oh,
Yes. Anybody who's not Jewish. I am classified as the Goyim. So if you have any Orthodox Jew, they will not let their daughter marry me because I am not Jewish. That's the end of it. Okay. So the Goyim are the nations. At that time, obviously, it was, the Mesopotamian Valley, because keep in mind, the whole world wasn't as populated at that time. But any nation outside of Israel, they are not allowed to marry. So Gentiles are the Goyim. And you got to remember, in the Bible, there's only two groups of people. There's Jews and Gentiles. That's it. If you're not a Jew, you're a Gentile. That's the way it works. Okay, so in verses 11 and 12, Shechem is offering a blank check for a dowry. He says, look, ask me whatever you want. Just let me marry this girl. I will give you whatever dowry you want, and then let's have, I don't know what you'd call it, but they want to make league between their families. Your family marries us, our family marries you. Let's make this a good thing. Okay, in verses 13 through 19, and the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father deceitfully, and said, because he had defiled Dinah their sister. And they said unto them, we cannot do this thing to give our sister to one that is uncircumcised, for that were a reproach unto us. But in this will we consent unto you, if ye will be as we be, that every male of you be circumcised, then will we give our daughters unto you, and we will take your daughters to us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. Now, they knew at the time when they're saying this, we are not allowed to do this. This is not going to happen, but don't tell them that. But, in verse 17, but if you will not hearken unto us to be circumcised, then we will take our daughter, and we will be gone. And where am I supposed to stop reading? Verse 19. And their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son, and the young man deferred not to do this thing because he had delight in Jacob's daughter, and he was more honorable than all the house of his father. Okay, so the sons of Jacob have a plan, and we're going to see there is more to this than just marrying off their daughter. Verses 14 through 17, the sons of Jacob lay out their terms. Essentially, all the men in the city need to be circumcised. If they will do that, then Jacob and his sons will marry their daughters and give Dinah to wed Shechem. In verses 18 19, Shechem agrees to this, and that brings us to verse 20. And stop me if I'm going too fast. I'm just, there's not too much we can take from this other than just going through the facts of the story. In verse 20, and Jacob set a pillar of, nope, I keep going to the wrong chapter, I'm sorry. Okay, chapter 34 still, in verse 20. And Hamor and Shechem, his son, came unto the gate of their city, and communed with the men of their city, saying, these men are peaceable with us, therefore let them dwell in the land, and trade therein, for the land, behold, it is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us for wives, and let us give them our daughters. Okay, so Hamor and his son Shechem are now relaying the proposal to the men of the land. Now in verse 20, notice, where do they have this little powwow? Where are they? In the city gates. Remember, we talked about that many times. In that time period, in that culture, there was one gate leading in and out of every city. That's where civil government met. That's where business dealings happened. That's where commerce happened. Okay, so the gate of the city was where you would go and talk to a judge if you had a grievance. That's where all deals were done. So Hamor and Shechem meet in the gate of the city. They talk to all the men of the city and they explain this is what these guys want if they're going to give us our daughter and we can give them theirs and we can be one big happy family. So, in verses 23 and 24, now this is what the men in the gate of the city say to Hamor and Shechem after they have their proposal. They say, shall not their cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? Only let us consent unto them, and they will dwell with us. And unto Hamor and unto Shechem his son hearkened all that went out of the gate of the city, and every male was circumcised, all that went out of the gate of the city. So, there's an agenda here. Hamor and Shechem and the men of the city, they had a plan to take over the substance of Jacob and his family. They said, let's just marry together, and then aren't their cattle really going to be ours, and isn't their land going to be ours, and they figure we're going to make out better, we're going to be on top, this is going to be a good thing for us, let's just do this thing, everyone will get circumcised, it's going to be better for us in the end. So Hamor and Shechem and all the men of the city were circumcised. Now, that is not a major ordeal for an infant. And another quiz, okay? When does God say to circumcise a baby boy?
8 days after birth.
Very good. The 8th day of life. So after the baby's born on day 8, and there is medical research that goes behind that as far as vitamin K in a person spikes to, I want to say like 120 or 130% of your normal levels. Vitamin K is what's necessary in the process of blood clotting. Very good. Which is obviously pertinent during a minor surgery. So circumcision on the 8th day for a baby. That's how God set it up. There's reasons behind it. But for a grown man to be circumcised, it is what we would call a minor surgery. That man is going to be in substantial discomfort and pain for several days. And the sons of Jacob knew this. Okay, so let's see what their plan was for. Verse 25. And it came to pass on the 3rd day, when they were sore, that 2 of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword and came upon the city boldly and slew all the males. And they slew Hamor and Shechem his son with the edge of the sword and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went out. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and spoiled the city, because they had defiled their sister. They took their sheep and their oxen and their asses and that which was in the city and that which was in the field, and all their wealth and all their little ones and their wives took they captive and spoiled even all that was in the house. And Jacob and I'm sorry, we're going to stop there at verse 30. We'll get there in a second. Okay, so let's see. Quick question, why was it Simeon and Levi? There are 11 sons, why was it those 2?
Are they the oldest?
They're not the oldest, they're the 2nd and 3rd oldest. Reuben was the oldest.
Are they from the same mom?
They were from the same mom as Dinah. Okay, so they were Leah's sons. So they were the big brothers of Dinah. So they were particularly angry. It wasn't a distant relative that this happened to, it was their baby sister. And they said, we are going to take care of it. So in verses 27 through 29, they spoiled the city, taking the livestock and all material wealth. They also took all the women and children they took captive, and I'm assuming put them into servitude. And this brings us to verses 30 and 31. So, and Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, ye have troubled me to make me to stink among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and I, being few in number, they shall gather themselves together against me and slay me, and I shall be destroyed, and I and my house. And they said, should he deal with our sister as with an harlot? So in verse 30, Jacob is upset because he fears revenge from the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Apparently, he's not upset of the sins of his children, just his potential exposure. His 2 sons murdered literally half of a city, and he doesn't bring it up. Whether he was upset about it or not, we never hear about it. Now, we do find out that later on, Simeon and Levi miss out on some of their inheritance because of this incident. We're going to see that in, I think it's Genesis chapter 49, when Jacob's an old man and he's handing out the inheritance and explaining the future of the nation of Israel to all of his children.
You don't think Jacob knew what these guys were up to?
You know,
I mean, you'd think
you
he would get some indication.
maybe. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot going on. You know, you got to remember that between the 11 sons, the daughter, you know, all the flocks and the herds and the servants, it was kind of like a small little town out there. So who knows? But, you know, yeah, I'm not sure. All I could give is conjecture, you know. Okay, and in verse 31, Simeon and Levi feel justified with their actions. Okay, so we're moving along. Chapter 35, and this is a short one. We won't be here long. And God said unto Jacob, Arise, go up to Bethel, and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God, that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. Then Jacob said unto his household and to all that were with him, Put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. And let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way which I went. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears. And Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were round about them, and they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob. Okay, so in verse 1, God is giving Jacob instructions where to go and what to do. Now, specifically, Jacob is going to go back to the exact spot where about 30 years ago he promised to pay God a tithe and follow him. In verses 2 through 4, even though, and I think that was back in chapter 28, so if you want to check up on it and read that story, you'll see that he's going back to the exact same spot. In verses 2 through 4, even though Jacob had met with God several times, both in the flesh and in dreams, his children still had pagan idols. Jacob had to tell them, get rid of your pagan idols, get rid of your clothing and your jewelry. Now, there is a clear application out of this for us today, even though we are following God. In one sense, we are saved, we spend time with God in prayer, we read our Bible, and yet we still have pagan idols and clothing and jewelry, just like the children of Jacob. Now, the way that God has set it up is that to worship God is not good enough. God does not want any rivals. Anything in our life that can come between us and God, that can take away the attention from God, is unacceptable. And that can be a different thing for anybody. I always wish money was it for me. I always hope and pray that I will have enough money one day where it could get in the way of my relationship with God. It has never happened. You ever see Fiddler on the Roof?
Yeah.
No.
When there's this scene where, and this is, we're getting into the weeds here, but there's this one scene where it's the first daughter that was going to be married,
Yeah.
and she was going to be married to, anyone?
Butcher.
The butcher. And who did she want to marry?
The tailor.
The tailor. Okay, and the tailor was this young guy that didn't have two pennies to rub together, and his dad was like, but the butcher, he's got money and he's got a house and you'll be taken care of. And the daughter said, some people say that money is a curse. And he says, let God smite me with such a curse. Anyway, it's one of my favorite scenes in the Bible. And he says, and let God not remove his hand of curse too quickly. Okay, so anyway, that was all just meant to be funny. So where were we? Okay, so the point is, it surprises me that there's only one family in the entire Bible that's following God. Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob and his children. And Jacob, before he goes to a place where he knows he's going to build an altar and pray to God, he has to tell all of his children, get rid of all your idols, get rid of all your clothing and jewelry. And please understand, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with earrings or jewelry. We assume that the jewelry had an image or an inscription of something that was inappropriate.
Amulets.
Yeah, something that had to do with pagan origins. But here's the thing to remember. Not only did his children have all this stuff, Jacob knew they had it. That is completely unacceptable to God. The idea is not that we're like, okay, we're about to walk into church. Okay, I'll sit down. There's an idol, and okay, that's pagan, and that's not the idea. The idea is that we don't have this stuff. We're not supposed to have to clean everything up right before we walk into church. It's not like the TSA where it's like, oh, I got a pocket knife, and some nail clippers. Those aren't allowed. No, we're not supposed to have the pagan stuff in our lives. There are things in our lives that can get in between us and God says they're not allowed. Now, I doubt that many of us have pagan idols in our life anymore. That's not typically what we find. Okay, that was obviously a cultural thing at the time. It was a pagan world. Okay, but the application is still there for us today. There might still be things in our lives and in our homes that God requires us to discard. Okay, Mom, did you have a question?
Yeah, it just surprises me. All of a sudden, like, Jacob is going to follow everything that God wants him to do, where before...
Oh, he was a train wreck.
Yeah, he was not listening to
Nope.
God talking to him at all.
Correct. He does not listen to God most of the time. But at this point, we're going to see that Jacob starts making a turn. He did it when he, right before we picked up in chapter 33 and 32, he wrestled with God. He met with God, spoke to God. God changed his name and told him what was going to be. And Jacob is slowly starting to make the turn and do things God's
He had a
ways.
detour by not going to see her.
Oh yeah, he clearly, he did not, don't get me wrong, Jacob does not bat 1,000 from this point forward. But what we will see is that he does way better. Okay, so let's give him credit where credit's due. He did clean out all the pagan nonsense from his house and from all of his kids and said, we're rid of it. Okay, so 1 point for Jacob, right? Okay, so in verse 5, God gave them safe passage as they traveled to Bethel. And why was that important? Well, because Levi and Simeon just killed an entire city, and some people were probably upset with them. So God gave them safe passage. Okay, let's pick it up in verses 6, 7, and 8. So Jacob came to Luz, which is in the land of Canaan, that is Bethel, he and all the people that were with him. And he built there an altar and called the place El Bethel, because there God appeared unto him when he fled from the face of his brother. But Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried beneath Bethel under an oak. And the name of it is called Al-Lon Bakuth. And that's it. Okay, so let's go over... Oh, I really don't need that yet. Bethel. What does it mean? We went over it before. How are we all doing on our Hebrew?
It's me.
Okay, what does El mean?
God.
Very good. God. What does Bet mean? I think that's the second letter in the Hebrew alphabet. Okay. House.
Oh.
What is it? Bethel? House of God. You got it. So, Bethel is the house of God. I don't remember what verse we're on. Here we go. 6, 7, and 8. So the entire family shows up in Bethel. And El Bethel, what does that mean?
God.
God's house. God's house.
The God of the house of God. El Bethel, the God of the house of God. Okay. And El-Lon Bakuth means the oak of weeping. Okay, so that is where
She was buried.
Deborah was buried. Okay, picking it up in verse 9. And God appeared unto Jacob again when he came out of Padan Aram and blessed him. And God said unto him, Thy name is Jacob. Thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And he called his name Israel. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be out of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. And the land which I gave Abraham and Isaac, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land. And God went up from him in the place where he talked with him. And Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, even a pillar of stone, and he poured a drink offering thereon, and he poured oil thereon. And Jacob called the name of the place where God spake with him, Bethel. And when we read through Genesis 28, Bethel is the same place when he was on his way to Padan Aram, to I think it's the city of Haran, to meet his uncle Laban and find a wife. He stopped on the way, and that was when he made a pile of stones and used them for a pillow and fell asleep, and he had the dream where he saw a ladder going up to heaven and angels ascending and descending, and at the top of the ladder was God. And what did he call that place? Bethel. Okay, so this is the exact same place. And God even said it in the previous verses. He said, go back to the place where you were the first time we met in Bethel, and we're going to do this thing again. Now, we talked about this, I don't know, a month or two ago. When he went through there the first time, remember, he set up an altar, and he made a lame, half-hearted covenant with God. He said, okay, God, well, if you do this and 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 this for me, then I guess I'll follow you. That's what he said to God. And then he incorrectly did a drink offering. Okay, so he did an offering his own way, and he made a lame covenant with God. And God, 30-something years later, says, Jacob, we're going to try it again. Go to the same spot, make another altar, because the one you made fell over, and we're going to do it again. And he makes a covenant with God, and God reaffirms the covenant with Jacob. He says, this is the covenant that I made with your father Abraham and Isaac. This will be your land, and I will make of thee a great nation, and the nation that comes from you will bless all other nations. The whole world will be blessed because of you. And anyone that blesses you will be blessed, and anyone that curses you will be cursed, and I will be your God, and you will be my people, and the size of the nation and your family will be as the sand of the seashore. He reaffirms the exact same covenant that he gave to Abraham and he gave to Isaac. Okay, and he does it in the same place here. And in verse 11, a prophecy is given here. In verse 11, what's the prophecy? What's the futuristic prediction that God makes? See if you can pick it up. What does God say is going to happen that has not happened yet?
Kings will come from.
Kings will come from thee. Remember, kings didn't come until the book of 1 Samuel. That's 1,000 years from this point when King David, or we should say we go back one king, starts with King Saul and then King David. The nation of Israel didn't have kings for 1,000 years, and he said that. And then 2,000 years from this point, who shows up? Jesus, the King of Kings. Okay, and this is a prophecy that was given all this time ago. Okay, in verse 12, God reaffirms the covenant he made with Abraham and Isaac. I already went over that. And in verses 13 through 15, somewhere around 30 years ago, we see when Jacob was running for his life, he left his father and mother and traveled north to Haran, where he met his wife Rachel. And on the way up there, he stopped in the exact same spot and set up an altar and incorrectly performs a drink offering and makes a lame, half-hearted promise to God. And now he's back in the exact same spot, and God takes him through and says, okay, Jacob, now your name is no longer Jacob, it's Israel. Time to make a change. Things are going to be different. Okay, let's read verses 16 through 20. And we're almost done. And they journeyed from Bethel, and there was but a little way to come to Ephrath, and Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. And it came to pass, when she was in hard labor, that the midwife said unto her, fear not, thou shalt have this son also. And it came to pass, as her soul was in departing, for she died, that she called his name Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin. And Rachel died and was buried in the way to Ephrath, which is in Bethlehem. And Jacob set a pillar upon her grave, that is the pillar of Rachel's grave unto this day. So Rachel died during childbirth, and Jacob named the final son, the 12th son, Benjamin. Okay, so there you have your 12 tribes, and we're going to see how that gets messed up a little later by the end of the book of Genesis. Now, you can go to Israel today, and you can find Rachel's tomb. Now, whether that is where she was actually buried or not, I don't know. You'll hear people argue both sides of that, but it is an important place to the Jews today. Benjamin means the son of my right hand. We're going to see how that applies later on. And Benjamin was the first Jewish boy born in the nation of Israel. All 11 of the boys before that were born in Syria. None of them were born in the Promised Land. Okay, verses 21 through 26. And Israel journeyed and spread his tent beyond the tower of Edar. And it came to pass, when Israel dwelt in that land, that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. And Israel heard it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. The sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and Simeon and Levi and Judah and Issachar and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel, she was the one that just died, Joseph and Benjamin. And the sons of Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, Dan and Naphtali. And the sons of Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, Gad and Asher. These are the sons of Jacob which were born to him in Padanaram. Okay, now, I'm not going to go over the family tree again. We went over that the last time we met, but essentially Jacob was the father of all 12 of these boys, and Dinah the one girl, and they were just by his 2 wives and their 2 handmaids. And we went over that whole story a couple chapters ago. Now, Reuben, in verse 22, loses his birthright over this incident of him having relations with Bilhah, his father's handmaid. And we read about that in Genesis chapter 49, verse 3. When Jacob is talking about the inheritance of the different kids, he says, and Reuben, you're not getting this and this and this because of what happened at this point. Now, we don't know what this was about. I can tell you that in some pagan cultures, this was the manner in which the eldest son took over the family. We don't know if that was what Reuben's intent was, but keep in mind, Reuben was the oldest son, so we're thinking maybe he was thinking Jacob's getting older and it's time for me to step up and take the reins of the family. I don't know. Later on, excuse me, under the Mosaic law, we find out that what he did will be considered a capital crime. In Leviticus chapter 20, verse 11, God lays that out, that what he did is a capital offense and he would have been killed under Mosaic law. Keep in mind, we are, several hundred years away from Mosaic law. Then verses 23 through 26, here we are given the family tree again, and I'm not going to repeat all that because we went over it last time. So let's read the last 3 verses and we'll be done for the night. And Jacob came unto Isaac his father, unto Mamre, unto the city of Arba, which is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac sojourned. And the days of Isaac were 180 years. That's 180. Score is 20 years. And Isaac gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people, being old and full of days, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. Okay, so Isaac was able to see all of his grandchildren before he died, but he only met 2 of Jacob's wives. Rachel and Deborah died prior to returning home to Isaac, and Isaac's wife, Rebekah, was already dead by the time Jacob came back to his homeland, so he never got to see his mother again. And one more thing, what did they do with Isaac? Last 2 words of the chapter? Buried him. What do they do with the people of God every time they die? They bury them. Every single time through the entire Bible, that's the way God set it up. Yes?
Why does the Bible refer to Jacob, like in verse 21, as Israel, and yet at the bottom, he goes back to calling him Jacob? I mean, why didn't they
Okay, good question. So the question is, why does the Bible sometimes refer to Jacob as Jacob, and other times they refer to him as Israel? So we're going to see that through the rest of the book of Genesis, where when Jacob is doing well and obedient, he is called Israel. And when he is doing what he wants and he's going against God's will, they call him Jacob.
Like Peter and Simon.
Yep, you see the same thing. Simon and Peter, Simon's given the name Peter, and you find out that he has the same thing happen. When he's following God, he's Peter, and when he's not, he's Simon. So, okay, very good. Any questions on what we went over? Yes, ma'am.
Why would Esau have brought like 400 men with him when he went to meet Jacob? Was that to, I mean, because he was so happy and everything to see Jacob.
Sure. So why did Esau bring 400 men when he got to Jacob, they embraced and they cried and they were so happy? And honestly, again, I could only give you conjecture. It seems like Esau might have still had the same plan. He might have had the same idea that at first his thought was, I'm going to do what I planned to do before. But we really don't know. You know, I mean, the lands back then were always somewhat dangerous, but I mean, who travels with 400, you know, with a small army? Yeah, I don't know. Shock and awe, wanted to let Jacob know who's boss. And just remember, Jacob, you're coming to Edom. This is my land. You know, I'm not sure.
Do you not find it strange that when Jacob found out his daughter was assaulted, that he didn't do anything other than basically want to make peace with Tamar?
Well, you know, again, I can't tell you why that is, but what you do find is that Jacob seemed to always take the easier, softer way. He never seemed to be the guy to want to deal with anything head on. He was sneaky with Isaac. He was sneaky with Esau. He was sneaky with Laban. You know, he was even sneaky with Esau a second time. And he seemed to be the same with God. So my only assumption could be he wanted to avoid conflict. As a matter of fact, when you look at Jacob's life, anytime a big conflict was in front of him, what did he do?
Made it break.
Yeah, he ran for it. And he ran hundreds of miles in the other direction to a place where no one knew his name. So that's the only thing, you know, I can assume. Other than that, we know that the city was a walled city, which means it had a population that was substantial to some degree. And he knew that he wasn't in the land where he was supposed to be. So maybe he had a concern as far as, well, I don't know if God's really gonna, you know, take care of me since I'm going directly against what his will is. God told me to go back home and see my dad, and I'm going in the wrong direction. So maybe that had something to do with it, but yeah, I really don't know. Yeah, good question. Yes, ma'am.
Do you hear about Dinah any further in the Bible?
I could look it up, but I don't know.
Okay.
As far as I know, she doesn't come up in any significant way that I can think of right now. But yeah, we're gonna see. Any other questions? Okay, so with that, everyone is dismissed. But I was given a question through email this last week. Okay, and I just told Louis this, and now I'm concerned I'm gonna have 20 questions every week. But if anyone wants, and I'll write this down for the people at home. Okay. PatrickHayes1611@gmail.com. If anyone has a question about anything they're reading in the Bible in the 2 weeks where we're not meeting, or anything to do with the Bible, please send those questions to me. I will do my dead level best to get those questions answered. So we had one question come in this week, and right now I am going to answer that question. It will take about 10 minutes, and I don't expect everyone to stay. I just want to get it on camera so it's recorded, so everyone can get cookies and chit chat, and you do not have to feel like you're interrupting anything. But I am going to stand right here and talk for 10 minutes so you can just listen to my voice in the background. So kids, go ahead and get a cookie. Don't feel like you have to stand here and listen to Dad. And I'm going to address the camera, and you guys can hear about it if you want. Okay, so the question of the night. was, what are they talking about when they're saying it will be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon at the judgment? So that is in Luke 10, verses 13 through 17. So let me read the 4 verses, and then I'll give you the background and explain the answer to this question. So first of all, the verses. Woe unto thee, Chorazin. Woe unto thee, Bethsaida. For if the mighty works had been done in Tyre and Sidon, which had been done in you, they had a great while ago repented, sitting in sackcloth and ashes. But it shall be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon at the judgment than for you. And thou, Capernaum, which are exalted to heaven, shall be thrust down to hell. He that heareth you heareth me, and he that despiseth you despiseth me, and he that despiseth me despiseth him that sent me. And the 70 returned again with joy, saying, Lord, even the devils are subject unto us through thy name. Okay, so what happened at this point was Jesus appointed 70 people. And it appears that Jesus gave them a special power to heal all manner of sickness, where the disciples had the same level of ability as God did to heal the blind and lepers and all manner of disease and cast out demons and the whole thing. And he said, go out and spread the word and do some miracles, prepare the way for me. So the 70 went out and they did this for a while, and then they come back to Jesus and they say, hey, you know, this was great. Even the devils adhered to us, and we were able to heal everyone, and it was wonderful, and great things happened. But what you find out is that these 3 cities, Chorazin, Bethsaida, and Capernaum, were obstinate. They did not want to hear it. They did not respond well. It didn't go well. So here's the background. Tyre and Sidon are 2 cities in present-day Lebanon. That's north of Israel. Jesus was sent to the Jews in Israel. So Jesus did not go to Tyre or Sidon to preach or do miracles. Chorazin and Bethsaida are in Israel. They are just north of the Sea of Galilee, about 4 miles apart from one another, and Chorazin is just barely north of Capernaum. Capernaum is a city we hear about a lot in the New Testament. Now, Chorazin was about 32 miles from Tyre. Tyre is a coastal city. Tyre is very important for any history buff that ever read about Alexander the Great. We'll get to that in a little while, just because it's one of my favorite stories of the world. Okay, so everyone who was in Chorazin knew about Tyre. They knew the city. It was 32 miles away. It was a coastal city. It was the same distance from Chorazin to Haifa, which is in Israel, another coastal city. Jesus, here's the layout. Jesus taught in Capernaum in the synagogue, with the result that his listeners were amazed at his teachings. Mark chapter 1. He healed many who were ill with various diseases and cast out demons from those who were demon-possessed, also Mark chapter 1 in Capernaum. He healed both Peter's mother-in-law, Matthew 8 and Mark 1, and he healed the paralyzed man that was let down through the roof. We read about that story, also in Mark chapter 2. He healed the centurion servant without even seeing him, just saying, your faith alone, he's healed right now at this very hour. Excuse me. We read about that in Luke chapter 7. It was from Capernaum that after healing Peter's mother-in-law that Jesus left by the sea to escape the crowds and stilled the storm in the Sea of Galilee. That's in Matthew chapter 8. So, some of the most impressive miracles that Jesus did during his time on earth were in and around Chorazin, Bethsaida, and Capernaum, those 3 cities. Yet, they did not repent. They did not follow Jesus. Additionally, these 3 cities were Jewish. Remember, Jesus was sent to the Jews. That's who his ministry was for, to fulfill the Old Testament. The goal was all the Jews were supposed to just line up and say, hey, look, here's the Messiah. We've been waiting for him for thousands of years. This is great. Didn't go that well. So, many other cities around the Sea of Galilee were Gentile cities, and most of them were thrilled to see Jesus. So Jesus, in this verse, is saying, you Jews in Chorazin didn't receive me when the Gentiles up in Tyre would have, if they had seen the miracles that I did here. Now in Mark 3, verses 7 and 8, we see that people from Tyre and Sidon traveled down to Israel to hear Jesus teach. In Mark chapter 3, verses 7 and 8. But Jesus withdrew himself with his disciples to the sea, and a great multitude from Galilee followed him, and from Judea, in verse 8, and from Jerusalem, and from Idumea, and from beyond the Jordan, and they about Tyre and Sidon. A great multitude, when they had heard what great things he did, came unto him. So Jesus is telling the Jews that these Gentiles are going to do better than you on Judgment Day. Now, at that time, that message was unheard of. You would never hear a Jewish rabbi, Pharisee, Sadducee, scholar, teacher ever say, these Gentiles are better than you, and they're going to fare better on Judgment Day. You would never hear that in the nation of Israel. At this time in history, in the nation of Israel, there is nothing you can say to insult an Israelite more than saying God likes these Gentiles more than you. They would have called you crazy because they were God's chosen people, and they believed that because of where they grew up, well, we grew up as Jews, that trumped everything. It didn't matter how wrong their beliefs were, because they grew up as Jews, they thought they were in the right. So, what I would take away from what Jesus said is this. When we get to heaven and we start going around and having small talk and chit-chatting with everyone that's up there, there are going to be way more people there from Tyre and Sidon than from Chorazin, Bethsaida, or Capernaum. Make sense? So that is our question of the night. Thank you, Tom, for sending it in through email. Please keep sending in the questions. Okay, you guys.